Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything is Energy. Welcome to the weekly astrology forecast. This is for the week of May 31st through June 6th, 2026. And this is a week that's really about listening for what is true. This week follows just this morning, we had just a super potent Sagittarius full moon at 1:45 a.m. I have a separate podcast on that, so I'm going to just kind of lightly touch on that here. And then we also have the larger, excuse me, backdrop of Uranus set in a conjunction, which is very much still operational. And, but also this week, the energy is kind of starting to shift from breakthrough and awakening to something a little bit more subtle. And the astrology this week is asking us to discern energy and information because not everything that appears clear is clear. Not every feeling needs immediate action, and not every thought is going to tell us the whole truth. We are absolutely in process of transformation. And so this is a week of really learning to trust both, on the one hand, our intuition, on the other hand, our discernment. And it doesn't have to be an either or situation. We're really being asked to develop both. So let's get started on Sunday, May 31st, as I mentioned, at close to, I think it's 1:42 or 1:45 a.m. this morning. It already happened. We have the full moon in Sag. And then, there's a couple more aspects that are worth noting here. We have, Mercury sextiling Chiron at 8:30 tonight. And this is a really beautiful aspect for healing conversations, for healing communication, even if that communication is journaling or visioning or vibrational. And really, it could also just be personal insight. And Mercury is in late Gemini here, harmonizing with Chiron in Aries. So this is going to give us some really great opportunities for speaking honestly and for maybe even cultivating a deeper understanding of old wounds. Maybe things become a little bit less scary and we can start to see how everything always shows up for a reason. It's a good time today to learn something about ourselves and also to help others. And maybe even healing arrives through communication, through conversation, through also remembering that communication is so much more than the words that we say. Sometimes it arrives through realization. And this aspect supports all of that. We have one more aspect tonight at around 11 a.m., and that is that Mercury is biquintile to Pluto. And this is going to give some really creative energy. And I would say that it's subtle, but it's powerful. Because of course Pluto's involved and that is subtle energy, but maybe there's this kind of deeper perception or energetic, emotional, psychological insight. And one way it might manifest is that we can see beyond the 3D world. We can see beyond appearances. We can see beyond the words that are spoken into the actual meaning. We can see beyond the gestures into the intention. And I'm not saying that those need to always be incongruous, not by any stretch, but it's really allowing us to see the alignments and disalignments. And it's really an opportunity for us to see things differently. And I don't think we have to during this day or Monday, because I'll get that Mondays are pretty quiet day. So these aspects are going to carry through. I don't think we have to try to do this. I often think about, pay attention to what captures your attention because our consciousness is powerful. And if there's something that piques our interest or is vibrating or humming in a way that's drawing our attention, there might be something there for us to have a deeper understanding of. Moving on to Monday, June 1st, which is tomorrow. I like to call these integration days because there's no major aspects on Monday, but after the Uranus sudden activation, the full moon, this just really feels like a wonderful day to integrate. And because there is so much going on, we absolutely need and can welcome these days that give us time to process, time to metabolize, time to integrate. And also just kind of remembering that not every insight, part of what we're learning right now is that we're not rushing. So not everything that we have an aha moment about necessarily needs us to develop this large course of action. It's about being in the process of transformation. And let's bring us ourselves next to Tuesday, June 2nd. This is one of the most important days of the week. This is a day of balancing intuition, along with bringing some stability. Our first aspect is just before 8 a.m. on Tuesday, and that is Venus is going to be semi-square to Uranus. Semi-square is it's subtle friction, but it's an interesting type of friction because we have Venus in Cancer with some subtle tension to Uranus in Gemini. And so that might mean that societally, emotionally, the things that Venus governs are our ability to love, our ability to see truth and beauty, our ability to value and work towards justice and balance and harmony. There might be some sense of uncertainty with this semi-square to Uranus, maybe a little bit of, craving both security as well as freedom. And again, realizing that it doesn't have to be an either or situation. That's the wonderful thing about when tension or squares or those negative aspects come up in astrology. I welcome them as much as I welcome the positive flowing aspects because they're really showing us things and inviting us to level up. So, rather than reacting, we are encouraged to bring curiosity and a bigger picture vision. What is asking to evolve? So that's just before 8 a.m. and then around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And just remember, I'm talking about the exact point in time when this is exact. Everything in astrology is what they call cuspy, and that means that these energies are kind of flowing and ebbing throughout the week. They might peak on the day that I'm speaking of. They might peak the day before, a couple days later, but these are just the themes that are present. So around 3 p.m., we have Mercury semi-sextile to Uranus. And so Mercury's now in Cancer. Uranus is still in the sign of Gemini. And, whenever Uranus is present, it means that there's lightning bolts of change that are possible. So this might mean that there's some new insights that emerge a little bit unexpectedly. And so, intuitive flashes, new perspectives, surprising conversations. I think the operational thing here is to stay open and stay curious. And the final aspect that's happening today is just before 7 o'clock, we have the sun sextiling Saturn. And this is honestly one of the most stabilizing aspects of this week. The sun is in Gemini, and a sextile is a harmonious flow of energy with Saturn in Aries. So this is kind of bringing focus and discipline and maturity and this grounded sense of well-being and confidence. And again, but the real background thing is that it's reminding us that not all growth requires urgency. So there's this theme that like we're invited to kind of release ourselves into this midland of being in the middle of a transformation, personal and societal and collective. So if we think about what we may have learned by trying to force something because we're over it, where it makes us uncomfortable, whatever the reason is, I think we can all kind of intuitively sense it. If we really force something too fast, it doesn't work out the way we want it to. So here, punchline is sometimes growth comes through consistency. That's the Saturnian energy here. Really wonderful day on Tuesday and aspects that are coming through on Tuesday. Wednesday is June 3rd. This is a day of intuition and discernment. And I would offer that this is a highly nuanced day. It starts around 4 a.m. We have Venus sesquiquadrate to the North Node. And this is just a subtle emotional adjustment. And I would say that it's refinement versus crisis. And there may be some questions that come up for us about priorities, about what we value, about what is fair and just in our world, what feels truly aligned. But if we remember that we're in a process of refinement, we're not in a crisis time, this is a really wonderful aspect. And just about an hour and a half later, before 6 a.m., we have Mercury trining the North Node. So the North Node is still operational this morning, and this is a really beautiful aspect for guidance. And that's guidance excuse me, our mental field. So, realizations, messages, downloads, conversations. Again, pay attention to what resonates. Pay attention to what you notice, not what you should notice, but what in your heart you notice or what vibrationally resonates with you. If there's any antidote for us humans that are so conditioned to linear time space reality and to, the way out is through and get it done as quick as possible and do everything you can, like that's Pluto and Capricorn. We're in this Pluto and Aquarius. We're really starting to remember how to embody circular power, being in community, and trusting ourselves to let go of some of the things that have kept us feeling safe and comfortable, because we on some level already know they're underserving us and they're underserving the whole, both. So, the antidote is our intuition, our truth, our knowing, our own understanding. And there's something really, I would just offer, powerfully afoot about awakening that's blooming and birthing right now. The final aspect here on the third is just about 8 p.m., and that is Mercury's going to square Neptune. So this might be the more important aspect, more palpable aspect of the day. A square is going to create some tension, and that tension is between what's going on with Mercury and Neptune. So that would be, on the one hand, logic and intuition, on the other hand, facts and information. But even I would say this sense of certainty versus mystery, because that's kind of what I'm alluding to, is like this, is this world that I'm looking at the world that I know? Am I in control? And then welcoming in the understanding of energy, welcoming in these new things that we may not have known or understood or prioritized. So while on the one hand it can bring confusion, it can also bring inspiration and absolutely a heightened sense of energy and intuition. I would say that this aspect is not necessarily the time to make a major decision. It's a really great time for meditation and, again, being in the process. Maybe creativity. It's my dog, sorry. Maybe spiritual practice. And this is really an invitation to listen without forcing anything. Let's move along to Thursday, June 4th. This is a day of grounded action and deep reflection. Starts off just before 3 a.m. with Mars semi-sextiling Saturn. Subtle energy here, but absolutely helpful. Mars is in Taurus at this point in time. Saturn is still in Aries. And this is going to create an opportunity for us to really bring action into alignment with this integrity and Saturnian karmic responsibility. But again, this is supporting patience and consistency and sustainable effort. Saturn does not necessarily rush. It doesn't always necessarily pump the brakes either, but it absolutely wants to make sure, all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. All the gears are engaged before we're trying to move the thing forward. The next aspect happens around 3 o'clock, and that's Mercury's quincunx Pluto. And so this might be an adjustment point for our mental fields. Pluto might bring unexpected perspectives or some information that changes how we understand or how we see something. And so really with this aspect on this day, one thing that might be helpful is for us to just have a willingness to revise our assumptions about what we think is true and be open to new information. Final aspect is around 8 o'clock on Thursday, June 4th, and that is the sun is semi-square to Chiron. And this is a potentially a tender energy. With Chiron presence, things can feel vulnerable or sensitive. With the sun, it's a challenging aspect. It's a friction. So this is definitely about our 3D world, and it makes it something that's more difficult to ignore. But rather than resisting it or ignoring it, this aspect is really inviting us to approach whatever it is that is coming up for us gently, and to realize that awareness itself can bring healing. If one of the things we're releasing is this conveyor belt of linear time and space, and, you know, A plus B gets us to C, and we're getting into this more broad and nebulous understanding, quantum physics style understanding of energy flows. Awareness can be healing. Awareness is healing. Absolutely. Shifts in energy and shifts in awareness are what create reality. Let's get to Friday, June 5th. This is a day of quiet momentum. We have just one aspect here today, and that's Mercury is going to quintile Jupiter really early in the morning around 1 a.m. Subtle energy again with the quintile, but a very constructive aspect. Mars and Jupiter work together creatively here. And they're really going to help us both with problem solving as well as with purposeful action and practical optimism and this sense of can do. And it's a reminder that also progress doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it just unfolds one piece at a time. Sometimes it unfolds steadily. And we'll close this week on Saturday, June 6th. And I would say that this day is a day of inspired vision. Just one aspect here around 5 o'clock in the evening, Sun is quintiling Neptune. And this is a really beautiful note to close this week on. Sun and Neptune create a really creative, a spiritual, and intuitive atmosphere. And this supports meditation and imagination and just connecting with our deeper meaning and our true purpose. And, this aspect on Sunday reminds us that intuition is not a separate thing from our everyday life. Intuition is something we carry with us every moment of every day. Excuse me, it's something that we can cultivate. And yes, absolutely, it is something that we can trust. So this week is maybe bringing some healing communications, some intuitive insight, some emotional refinement, some moments of uncertainty, but those bring deeper discernment, and awareness of our own abilities to discern and to create. And the question here is, can we remain open without being overwhelmed? Can we trust our intuition while still honoring our discernment? And can we ultimately, I'm talking about being in the middle of this massive transformation, can we allow clarity to emerge gradually rather than forcing certainty? So I hope you find this helpful. Have a beautiful week, bright blessings, and so much love. I'm grateful for you.